It was a cool, crisp spring day on April 17th, 1935, and Bert Hobson and his son Ron, recognizing the beautiful weather, had decided to go fishing. So, getting in the car and driving to the beach, they eventually arrived at their destination. They would be fishing from a 12-foot launch off Maroubra Point in Cogney, Sydney, Australia. Bert and his son Ron had been there many times and were excited to spend the day fishing. So, setting up, they baited their lines and waited eagerly for the fish to start biting. Hours passed, and quickly the morning had turned into evening. They had not been very successful that day, and so they had decided to pack it in. However, just before leaving, they would bait their lines just one last time and set them out. They would return the following morning to see if they had caught anything profitable. Tugging at their lines one last time to ensure they were secure, Bert grabbed his son, and together they went home. The following morning, when they arrived back at their spot, Ron excitedly ran out ahead of his dad to check their lines. To his surprise, they had caught something, and it was big. Bert soon discovered that they had caught a mighty 14.5-foot tiger shark. With the help of his son, Bert managed to catch the shark and sold it to the local Kaji aquarium, which just so happened to be run by Bert's brother, Charlie. Charlie had hoped that the addition of such a large shark would help attract some much-needed visitors. By 1935, the Great Depression was in full swing, and the aquarium could use all the visitors it could get. Charlie was hoping that this shark would be the key to turning that around. But on the afternoon of April 25th, a full 8 days after the shark's capture, something horrifying happened. Aquarium handlers made a gruesome discovery. Floating at the top of the shark's tank was a human arm, severed cleanly at the shoulder. Using a stick, the handlers carefully dragged the arm to the side of the tank and turned it over to the police. To the surprise of the police, the arm was in amazingly good condition. Although the arm had been swallowed days ago, the gastric juices of the shark had not yet dissolved the arm. Furthermore, a piece of rope, tied around the wrists, was able to be retrieved from the arm. Police speculated that likely the stress of being caught and then transported to the aquarium likely slowed the digestion of the arm and aided in its preservation. At first, police speculated that the arm was simply evidence of another unfortunate shark attack. After all, there had already been 3 attacks in recent months, and being Australia, things like this were not uncommon. However, further inspection of the arm revealed a terrifying detail. The arm had not been bitten off, as previously speculated, but had been cut off, almost surgically. This, of course, added a new layer of complexity to the case. In the span of just a few minutes, the focus of the investigation had shifted to murder. Although no easy task, a fingerprinting analysis was subsequently taken on the arm, and police received their first lead on the case when a man by the name of Edwin Smith came forward, recognizing the distinct tattoo that had been found on the arm. Edwin told police that his brother, James Smith, had been missing since April 7th, over 3 weeks after announcing he would be going on a fishing trip. Fingerprinting later confirmed that the arm did indeed belong to James. James was a 45-year-old, English-born criminal, boxer, and police informant who had moved to Australia. Although police could now ID the arm, they now had the difficult task of finding out who James's killer was and why he had been killed. As a police informant, James Smith had several connections with the criminal underworld, and, while looking into his past, investigators discovered a connection between James and a man named Reginald Holmes. On the surface, Holmes appeared to be an upstanding, respectable member of high society. Holmes ran a successful shipbuilding company in Lavender Bay, and did not seem like someone who would involve himself in criminal affairs. Closer investigation revealed, though, that Holmes was involved in a slew of illegal activities, from smuggling operations to insurance fraud, and that it appeared as if Smith had been complicit in these schemes, having once been hired by Holmes to smuggle drugs into the country from the east. Furthermore, investigators also discovered that, a year before Smith's murder, he and Holmes had been riding on an overinsured yacht when suddenly it caught fire and sank. Finding the circumstances surrounding the fire to be suspicious, the insurance company refused to pay, and the two were not able to cash in on their insurance fraud scheme. Investigators proceeded to take Holmes in for questioning, who vehemently denied any involvement in the bizarre case. However, Shortly after being released, Holmes would be taken back into police custody with a wound on his head, claiming that somebody had shot at him. Obviously, the police were skeptical of Holmes' story and simply assumed that the graze on his head was part of a failed suicide attempt. Further interrogation of Holmes led police to convicted forger Patrick Brady. Thereafter, police searched a cottage that Patrick Brady had been renting on Tulumbi Street in Cronulla that was known as Cord Joy. This search would reveal several clues that would be crucial in the case against Holmes and Brady. Upon investigation of the cottage, police noted that it had been scrupulously cleaned, and that the owner of the cottage had noticed that, since Brady had rented it, many dozens of possessions had gone missing, including 2 rugs, 2 mats, a mattress, a metal trunk, and most importantly, a rope. Impressed with these findings, police brought Patrick Brady in for questioning, and days later arrested him for the murder of James Smith. Confident that they had solved the case, police had scheduled Holmes to give testimony in the much-anticipated trial of Brady. However, Holmes would not live long enough to see this day, as in the early hours of the very morning of the inquiry, Holmes was found shot dead in his car on Hickson Road, Dawes Point, near Sydney Harbour Bridge. The position of his wounds had indicated that he had been shot 3 times by someone sitting in the passenger seat of the car, and since there were no signs of an apparent struggle, it had to have been by someone Holmes had trusted enough to allow him into his car. In his place, investigators would call Holmes's wife to give testimony. In court, she would claim that on April 8th, Patrick Brady had visited their home, and that he was beaten, bandaged, and bloody. On his back, he carried a knapsack she recognized as belonging to Smith. Supporting this claim was a taxi driver who had been called to the stand. He claimed that he had driven Brady from Cronulla to Holmes's home in North Sydney. Overhearing the conversation between Brady and Holmes, she stated that Brady had murdered Smith, dismembered him, and, quote, put it in a tin trunk, put it in a boat, and tipped it overboard. As to how the arm had managed to escape, investigators chalked this up to Brady somehow forgetting to pack the arm and, while out on the water, tossed it overboard, where it was subsequently eaten by a shark. Although this case may seem open and shut, at the time, the Australian Supreme Court did not constitute an arm as a body, and with no way to confirm whether or not Smith had actually been murdered or had simply just lost his arm, the murder conviction was tossed out. To this day, the generally accepted theory is that after their failed insurance fraud scheme, James Smith and Reginald Holmes had a falling out. Given Smith's connections as a police informant, it was suspected that he had threatened to expose Holmes's criminal activities. Holmes's wife later revealed that she had found a note in her husband's pocketbook showing that Holmes had owed Smith 60 Australian pounds, roughly $5,500 in today's money. To protect his reputation and erase his debt, Holmes hired Brady to kill Smith, but Brady, not trusting Holmes's ability to handle the pressure of the investigation, later murdered Holmes as well, silencing him forever. Unfortunately, the killers of James Smith and Reginald Holmes were never brought to justice. At the time, murder convictions without a body were rare, but with advancements in forensic science today, such cases are no longer so difficult to solve. One famous example is the case of Richard Crafts, who murdered his wife in 1986 and disposed of her body with a wood chipper. Despite the lack of a body, DNA technology was able to lead to his conviction, and he was sentenced to 50 years in prison. In the case of James Smith and Reginald Holmes, the truth may never fully come to light, but their story remains a chilling reminder that, even in a world where we so often feel we know the answers, sometimes the most mysterious and dark truths remain hidden just beneath the surface. If you liked that video, please consider leaving a like and a thumbs up, and if you have any suggestions for future videos or ways that we can improve, please leave them in the comments below. With that, thank you for listening, and I hope to see you in the next video.